Sometimes, the people you love most are the ones who leave you with the deepest wounds. This is the story of Andrea Reyes, a little girl who disappeared in 1999, and a father who never stopped looking for her. It all began on October 5th, 1999. New Haven, Connecticut. Andrea Reyes was just 23 months old, not even 2 years old, when she vanished without a trace. Her parents, Carlos Reyes and Rosa Tenorio, were married at the time. But their marriage was falling apart. Arguments, resentment, custody battles, the kind of messy, bitter end that leaves scars on everyone involved. Eventually, the courts made a decision. Andrea's father, Carlos, was granted full custody. Andrea would live with him, and not with her mother. But then, on that October day, everything changed. Andrea was taken from her father's home. Gone. Just like that. Police were called immediately. They canvassed the neighborhood, talked to neighbors, scoured the area for any sign of Andrea, and soon, all signs pointed in one direction: her mother, Rosa Tenorio. Rosa didn't have custody, but investigators believed she took Andrea and fled the country, all the way to Puebla, Mexico. An arrest warrant was issued, but Rosa had vanished, and Andrea, she vanished with her. Years passed, no sightings, no leads, no answers. The case went cold. But Carlos Reyes, he didn't give up. He refused to believe his little girl was gone forever. He traveled to Mexico again and again, following rumors, whispers, hopes, anything that might lead him to Andrea. He had heard she was still there, living quietly, growing up under a different name. But every lead led nowhere. Then, in 2023, 24 years after Andrea first disappeared, something changed. The New Haven police decided to take another look. This time they had tools they didn't have before: technology, social media, modern investigative methods. They retraced every step, re-examined old leads, followed new ones, and slowly, the pieces began to come together. Their search led them back to Puebla, Mexico. There, they believed, was Andrea, not a missing toddler anymore, but a grown woman. Still, they needed proof. It had been too long, too many years, too many questions. So they turned to science, DNA testing. In March 2025, the results came back. It was her. Andrea Reyes had been found. She was now 27 years old, alive, safe, and ready to reunite with the father who had never stopped searching for her after 24 long years.
A woman who was abducted as a toddler 25 years ago has been found. Andrea Michelle Reyes was 23 months old when she was reported missing in 1999 in New Haven, Connecticut. But thanks partially to new DNA technology, the now 27-year-old has been found after her mom, Rosa Tenorio, allegedly took her and fled the country, according to authorities. In a March 5th statement, the New Haven Police Department said investigators located Andrea in Puebla, a city in central Mexico. They were able to do so after a special victims unit with a focus on missing persons reopened her cold case in 2023.
It was a moment of joy, but with the understanding that the process is not over. We have some sense of happiness, but the chapter is not closed yet.
We recognize that this reacquaintance will have challenges. However, we are confident that God is building the path before us and leading our steps.
Carlos Reyes finally held his daughter again. But not every story ends neatly. Andrea chose to stay in Mexico. It's the only home she's ever really known. Her life there remains private. And the truth about her relationship with her mother, still a mystery. What we do know is this: Rosa Tenorio is still wanted. Her fugitive status remains active. But efforts to bring her back to the US, they've stalled. Without help from Mexican authorities, justice remains out of reach. No one knows exactly where Rosa is today, and there are no current plans to bring her to trial. Andrea has been found, but some questions may never be answered. still for Carlos Reyes, finding his daughter after 24 years. That was the answer that mattered most. Sometimes, people vanish quietly. No big scene, no headlines, just an ordinary day, and then nothing. But when you start pulling at the threads of these disappearances, you often find something much darker tangled beneath. Secrets, violence, fear, and in this case, a silence that lasted for decades. This is the story of Barbara Lenz. It was May the 6th, 1989. Barbara Lenz was 31 years old, living a simple, quiet life in Woodbine, Iowa. She had plans that day to visit her ex-boyfriend in Omaha, Nebraska, the father of her 3-year-old daughter. But Barbara never showed up, and she was never seen again. Days passed. Her family grew worried. They hadn't heard from her since May 3rd. That wasn't like Barbara. So, on May 17th, they contacted the Woodbine police. Police and family went to her apartment. Barbara wasn't there, and something felt off. Her pets, uncared for. Her purse, her wallet, her clothes, all still there. Nothing packed, nothing missing, no sign of a struggle. It didn't look like someone who planned to leave. It looked like someone who vanished, without warning. And Barbara. She never told anyone where she was going. Investigators quickly learned that the last person to see her alive was her boyfriend at the time, a man named Robert Davis. He claimed Barbara called him from Omaha, said she was with her daughter, but police found out that call never happened. Barbara never made it to Omaha, and as they started digging deeper, a much darker picture of Robert Davis began to emerge. Barbara had been scared of Robert. She told people she was. Just before she vanished, she told at least 2 friends, "If I try to leave him, he'll kill me." Their relationship had been violent. Barbara had been strangled unconscious more than once, and there was even a time in public when Robert hit her little girl in a restaurant. Witnesses saw it, and Robert, he admitted it to police. He didn't like Barbara visiting her daughter's father in Nebraska. They had argued about it right before she disappeared. One witness said Robert had even slashed Barbara's face with something sharp. That same night, they were seen leaving together. But later, Robert showed up at a bar, telling people he was looking for Barbara. Strange, considering he'd just been with her. And then, something even more disturbing. Another witness claimed they saw Robert and his brother burying something wrapped in plastic on rural land near Robert's home. His brother even pointed out the exact spot to that witness, but no one knows if police ever dug it up. Time passed, leads dried up. Barbara's remains were never found, and eventually, her case went cold. Then, 17 years later, mushroom hunters found skeletal remains. A woman's body, hidden inside a 55-gallon barrel. At first, hope. Could it be Barbara? But no, dental records said otherwise. Still, the case was reopened. Investigators weren't giving up. And finally, after 35 years of silence, March 10th, 2025, Robert Davis was arrested, charged with first-degree murder. Investigators believe he killed Barbara deliberately, with premeditation. He pleaded not guilty. No trial date yet. But after all these years, Barbara's family is finally seeing a step toward justice.
We start with breaking news this afternoon. An Iowa man is arrested for murder in a 36-year-old Iowa cold case. Robert Allen Davis was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Court documents accuse Davis of murdering Barbara Lenz. The 31-year-old mother disappeared in 1989 from the town of Woodbine in Harrison County. Her body has never been found. A criminal complaint says Davis was Lenz's boyfriend and was known to be violent and abusive. This complaint says Lenz expressed to several people that she was afraid of Davis and tried to get away from him. The complaint also says Davis assaulted Lenz several times.
Barbara's daughter, Lindsay, waited her whole life for this moment. "I never thought this day would come," she said. "For me, justice means bringing my mama home."
If there comes a day where you get that call and they say, "We arrested this person," what would that mean to you?
Oh, I don't even know if I would have words for that right now. It would be very emotional, very emotional. It's something that I have honestly waited for my whole life.
Even now, Barbara's remains have never been found, and for her family, the questions still linger. Where is she? What happened that night? Cold cases like this remind us. Time doesn't erase the truth. It just waits beneath the surface. And sometimes, it takes decades for justice to catch up. Imagine spending nearly 2 decades behind bars for a brutal crime you didn't commit. Losing everything because of lies, because of fear, because the truth stayed hidden for decades. And now, after more than 40 years, the truth has finally come to light. This is the tragic and haunting story of Katharina Reitz, of Kenneth Waters, and the cold case that Massachusetts police just solved with the help of modern DNA science. It all started on May 21st, 1980, in the quiet town of Ayer, Massachusetts. Inside a small trailer home, something horrific had happened. Katharina Reitz, 48 years old, found murdered, beaten, stabbed 30 times. 5 of those wounds went straight through her heart. The scene told a story of struggle, signs of a fight, her purse, gone, jewelry, missing, and a large sum of cash, money she kept hidden in the linen closet, stolen. Police found blood, fingerprints, even hairs they believed belonged to the killer, and the murder weapon left behind in the trash can. They had evidence, but what they didn't have was the right suspect. Soon, investigators turned their attention to Kenneth Waters. He lived next door to Katharina with his girlfriend, Brenda Marsh. He worked at a local diner where Katharina was a regular customer. And people at the diner knew something. Katharina kept cash in her home. Police questioned Kenneth. He had an alibi. He'd been at work until 8:30 a.m., then at court with his attorney at 9 a.m. After court, he went back to the diner until 12:30 p.m. No blood, no cuts, no injuries on him that day. Police fingerprinted him, questioned him further, but he wasn't charged. For 2 years, the case went nowhere. Then, in 1982, things took a dark turn. Brenda, Kenneth's ex by then, had started dating a man named Robert Osborne. Robert went to police with an offer, information, for money. He claimed Brenda told him Kenneth confessed to the murder. Police brought Brenda in. They threatened her, told her they'd charge her as an accessory, take her kids away. At first, Brenda said it wasn't true, but eventually, under pressure, she broke. She told them Kenneth came home that morning with a scratch on his face. Another ex-girlfriend, Rosanna Perry, was also dragged in. After hours of interrogation, she finally said Kenneth had mentioned stabbing a woman. That was enough for the police. They arrested Kenneth, despite having zero forensic evidence linking him to the scene. Kenneth went on trial in 1983. A forensic analyst testified, none of the hairs found, including those clutched in Katharina's hand, matched Kenneth. But it didn't matter. Kenneth was convicted on May 11th, sentenced to life in prison. He appealed, over and over, all denied. Even when Rosanna Perry later recanted her testimony, it changed nothing. Kenneth stayed behind bars, but Kenneth had someone who refused to give up on him. His sister, Betty Ann Waters. She went back to school, put herself through college, then law school, all to prove her brother's innocence.
Police arrested Kenneth Waters, a man who always maintained his innocence. His sister, Betty Ann Waters became a lawyer to clear his name.
And for 42 years, I've always wondered, of course, who did this? Who did this, and who, caused such destruction in our family, and my brother spending all those years in prison.
In 1999, she found the old blood evidence from the crime scene. She got a court order to preserve it for DNA testing and teamed up with the Innocence Project. In 2000, DNA testing proved what Kenneth had said all along. He was not the killer. His conviction was vacated. He walked free after 18 years in prison. Kenneth's freedom didn't last long. Just 6 months later, in a tragic accident, he passed away. He was only 47 years old. His sister said, "Kenny had the best 6 months of his life. After so many years behind bars, the world was new to him."
And the first thing I wanted to do was call him. I'm like, we know, because that was always our conversation. Who did it all those years?
Feels great to be free.
Kenneth Waters was exonerated in 2001, but died just 6 months later after a fall caused fatal brain trauma.
It was a long haul. It definitely was, but like my brother at least died free and innocent. So that was a saving grace that he didn't die in prison, a guilty man.
And what about Katharina? For decades, her real killer remained hidden. But in 2022, the cold case unit used forensic investigative genetic genealogy. A mouthful, but a game changer. Working with experts at Parabon Nanolabs, they followed the DNA to a family tree to 2 brothers. Both were dead, but living relatives agreed to help. The DNA trail led to Joseph Leo Boudreau, 37 years old at the time of the murder, a convicted felon, died in 2004. His blood had been at the crime scene all along. District Attorney Marion Ryan said it best. "No matter how much time passes, our priority remains the same, to seek answers."
Forensic genealogy and decades-old evidence, investigators have identified a new suspect, Joseph Leo Boudreau, a man with a criminal past who lived in Natick at the time. He died in 2004.
He was born in Natick in 1943, so he was 27 years old the time that he was in Mrs. Brow's home and had committed that crime.
And finally, after 45 years, Katharina's family has those answers. They can say her name, they can speak the truth, and they can know.
She was a hardworking wife, mother, and sister who died violently in her own home.
The real killer has been identified. 2 lives destroyed. One by murder, one by injustice. Katharina Reitz, Kenneth Waters. Both deserved better. And finally, after all these years, truth caught up with time. October 1984. A stretch of highway in Arkansas. Ordinary workers out doing an ordinary job, mowing the grass along Interstate 40. But what they found that day was anything but ordinary. It was the body of a man, left near the side of the road. No name, no ID, no answers. For nearly 40 years, this man remained a mystery, a case that went cold almost as quickly as it began, a story nearly forgotten. But sometimes, the past refuses to stay buried. It was October 30th, 1984. Those Department of Transportation workers had been clearing the roadside like they always did. But something caught their eye, something that didn't belong. As they got closer, the horror became clear. It was a man's body, abandoned, alone, left to the elements. Police rushed to the scene. An investigation kicked off immediately. But this was going to be a tough one. The man had been out there for some time. His body was badly decomposed. There was no wallet, no ID, no way to tell who he was. An autopsy revealed how he died. Strangulation. Someone had killed him. This wasn't some tragic accident. This was murder. But without knowing who the man was, investigators had nowhere to turn. And in 1984, forensic science had its limits. No DNA databases, no fancy technology to help solve the puzzle. The case went cold, year after year. No answers came. For almost 4 decades, the man was simply labeled John Doe. No name, no story, no justice. But then, in 2024, everything changed. The Arkansas State Police reopened the case. They believed modern science might finally give this man his name back. The remains were sent to a specialized DNA lab in Texas. Experts worked tirelessly, doing what simply wasn't possible back in the 80s. And then, in March 2025, they got their answer. The DNA results came in. After 40 years, this unidentified man finally had a name: Earl James McDaniel. He was 53 years old when he died, originally from Kansas City, Missouri. To confirm it, investigators tracked down his daughter. She was living in Washington State. Her DNA matched. There was no doubt anymore. After all those years, Earl had been found. So, who was Earl James McDaniel? Born in 1931, just one daughter, a man with a troubled life, a life filled with bad choices and even worse luck. He had a long history of run-ins with the law. In the 1960s, he served time in prison in Washington State. Throughout the 1980s, arrests followed him from place to place. He never seemed to settle down, never seemed to stay out of trouble. Earl's past painted a picture of a restless man, always moving, always running, but identifying him only brought more questions. Who killed him? Why? Records show Earl James was last seen alive on September 11th, 1984. That's when he was pulled over for drunk driving in Oskaloosa. After that, nothing. No more arrests, no more sightings, no more records, until his body was found near Interstate 40 over a month later. The cause of death? Strangulation. A method that suggests something personal, not random, not an accident. Someone targeted Earl. Someone wanted him dead. The Arkansas State Police Cold Case Unit is still searching for answers. They're hoping someone, somewhere, knows something, anything, about who Earl crossed paths with between September and October of 1984. Even now, all these years later, they're determined to find out the truth, because after 40 years, Earl James McDaniel finally has his name back. But he still doesn't have justice. Not yet.
DNA technology has helped solve another cold case in Arkansas, this one 4 decades old.
Earlier today, state police identified 53-year-old Earl James McDaniel after the investigation stalled back in the fall of 1984.
That's when road workers found McDaniel's strangled body near Carlisle along I-40. Right away, the case went cold when police couldn't get an ID.
Back in March of last year, state police reviewed the case and submitted DNA to Othram Labs in Texas. That same company helped open major breakthroughs in the Mork and Nick case last year.
If you have any information, no matter how small, please get in touch with the Arkansas State Police, because every person deserves to be remembered. Every story deserves an ending, and Earl James McDaniel deserves the truth. On December 1st, 1988, police responded to a remote construction site in Beaverton, Oregon. They had received multiple reports about a suspicious vehicle parked at the edge of the woods. When Beaverton police arrived, they found the car abandoned. There were no plates. The windows were frosted over. And the driver's side window? It was left open, with the keys still inside. But the real horror wasn't in the driver's seat. It was in the trunk. Inside, police discovered the body of Deborah Atrops. Her blue coat and black heels were covered in mud, and the car itself. It was smeared with mud. On the hood, the steering wheel, the gear shift, even the front right tire.
It's 1988. Debbie Atrops is missing, and days later, Beaverton police found her strangled, stuffed in the back of her own car.
We were investigating that missing person, believing that foul play may have occurred. We did open the trunk of the vehicle, and the woman was found deceased.
From the start, detectives focused on one man, her husband, Robert Elmer Atrops. Deborah and Robert had married just a year earlier. But by the time she disappeared, They had been separated for months. Friends were already worried about Deborah's safety, and with good reason. Investigators collected mud samples from the car, from the crime scene, and Robert's home. The medical examiner determined that Deborah's life had been ended by manual strangulation. Deborah was only 30 years old. She worked as a secretary and bookkeeper. And she shared an infant daughter with Robert, a child they had recently adopted together. Their marriage had been troubled. Physical abuse, friends said. Deborah had started seeing someone new at work, and she told people she feared Robert might hurt her. She worried he might kill her. On November 29th, 1988, Deborah left work in Sherwood for a 5:15 p.m. hair appointment in Teagard. She finished around 7 p.m. and had planned to pick up her daughter from Robert's house around 9:30 p.m. That's when things got strange. Robert began calling friends, family, even 911, claiming Deborah was missing. He said he was calling from his home phone, but records showed no such calls were ever made from his house. Investigators suspected Robert wasn't even home when he made those calls, and despite his claims, he told police he never saw Deborah that night. His alibi? It couldn't be fully confirmed. The case eventually went cold. Police cleared everyone else close to Deborah, including the man she had been dating. For years, there were no answers. Then, in 2020, more than 3 decades later, the Washington County Sheriff's Office took a fresh look. Cold case detective Kevin Winfield began digging deeper. He tracked down new witnesses, uncovered new information, and submitted old evidence, Deborah's clothing and those original soil samples, for forensic analysis. The results were damning. Robert's DNA was found on the coat Deborah was wearing the night she died, and the FBI crime lab confirmed something else. The mud on Deborah's car matched the mud from Robert's property. Detective Winfield also discovered that Robert had been selling roofing materials at construction sites, including one near the spot where Deborah's body had been dumped. In 2022, Winfield interviewed Robert again. This time, Robert's story didn't match what he had said in 1988. There were significant inconsistencies. Finally, on March 23, 2023, a grand jury indicted Robert Atrops for second-degree murder. He was arrested nearly 35 years after the crime.
On Thursday, a jury convicted Robert Atrops of second-degree murder, the man who reported his wife missing to begin with.
At trial in April 2025, Robert's defense team tried to cast doubt on the DNA evidence. They argued the lab's analysis was unreliable, that DNA science was too complex, and that the jury couldn't fully understand it. They even suggested that, of course, a husband's DNA might be on his wife's coat. And they accused law enforcement of failing to seriously consider other suspects. But the prosecutors disagreed. They pointed to the crime lab's thousands of cases of experience. They stood by the science and the evidence. After a 3-week trial, the jury needed less than a day.
These are the moments right after the verdict. Inside the courtroom, complete silence. In a statement, Robert Atrops' attorney expressed disappointment over the verdict, saying the defense plans to file an appeal and will fight for his return to his family. For Allison Brown, this verdict brings justice for Debbie, closure for the detectives who never stopped, and a resolution to the years of unanswered questions.
On April 17, 2025, Robert Atrops was found guilty of murdering his wife Deborah back in 1988. On May 20th, 2025, both sides made arguments in court about when Robert could be eligible for parole. Final sentencing is scheduled to resume in July.